Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor. And before we get to our episode today, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord if you want to stay in touch off YouTube. I'm also on Twitter. You can also follow me there. But today, we've done so much about, Blessed Emperor Charles. And, I went to the Blessed Charles Symposium last year, but we haven't done as much about Empress Zita. So uh, I have Diane Schwind here with me today, who is the uh, president of the American Foundation of the Cause for the beatification of Empress Zita. So welcome to the show, Diane.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to share all that I can about Zita.
So you had a symposium of your own just just last Saturday. Can you tell us about how that came to be?
Um, well, as you said, you participated in the Blessed Carl Symposium last fall, and the foundation just began 3 years ago. The American Foundation for the beatification of Empress Zita, and of course, we wanted to dive in with both feet. And so 2 years ago, we had our first symposium, and so we're trying to do them every other year, off year of the Blessed Carl Symposium. So it was time. And so we put together to be honest, we didn't actually put it all together. We put together what we thought was a great line of a couple of speakers, and then a third speaker jumped in and asked if he could be a part of it. And, I'll just say, how do you tell an Archduke no? So of course we were so excited. So we had Mr. Charles Coulomb, who was the keynote speaker. And as usual, he did a fabulous job. He is just an encyclopedia of knowledge and of history, and did a beautiful job. And then we had, again, as we did the first time, Princess Maria Anna Galitzin, who is one of the granddaughters of Karl and Zita. Well, she happened to be telling her cousin, Archduke Rudolph of Austria, about the event. And so I get a phone call. We were actually in the baptism of one of our grandchildren, and I heard my phone go to voicemail. And when I checked it, had a voicemail that says, "This is Archduke Rudolph of Austria." And it's like, what? And he had heard about the event and asked if he could come and speak. And so again, do you tell an Archduke no? Of course not. No, we were thrilled. We were thrilled. So he and his wife, Archduchess Marie Helen, came from Switzerland, actually, with Princess Maria Anna and her husband, Prince Piotr Galitzin. And the three, Charles Coulomb, Archduke Rudolph, and Princess Mariana, were our speakers. And it was just amazing. It just was very, very good.
And it being at the Clear Creek Abbey is a pretty great place to host a symposium, I'd imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Clear Creek Abbey is the American home for the foundation. And there's a beautiful, lineage to that, a story that goes with that. Clear Creek Abbey, if people are not aware, is a daughter foundation of Solesmes through Faucombeau, which are both French Benedictine monasteries. And just 21 years ago, they founded Clear Creek. Well, Zita was an oblate of Solesmes. Mm. And she also had three sisters and a grandmother at St. Cecile's, which was the convent that was connected with Solesmes. And in fact, in her older years, she actually petitioned the Holy Father to become a nun at St. Cecile's. And only problem was her family petitioned the Holy Father to not let her. So they didn't want to lose her to the convent fully. So it was Pope Benedict XV who gave her the permission to go for 3 months out of the year and stay at St. Cecile's there at Solesmes. So it just was beautiful, events that just fell into place, and details that just fell into place, that it be housed at Clear Creek Abbey, because Clear Creek is a monastery of Salem, of the Salem congregation.
Gotcha. Yeah, so there's that Benedictine uh connection there. It's really beautiful. And so what came first, the Blessed Charles Symposium or the Empress Zita Symposium?
Blessed Charles, because
Okay.
that's how the American Foundation for Zita's Cause came about. In 2019, David Ross hosted a good size symposium that year, and Bishop Athanasius Schneider was one of the speakers. Well, my husband and I are oblates of Our Lady of Clear Creek Abbey, and we have once a year an oblate retreat. Well, it just happened to fall that year the same day as the symposium. And
Oh.
so we went to Father Pryor, who is our oblate master, and said, okay, where do you want us? Should we be there at the symposium, or should we be here at the retreat? Where do you want us? Well, my husband and I have had a marriage and family ministry for about 15 years, Three Hearts Institute. And so Father Pryor said, no, you need to be at that symposium because you need Carl and Zita's intercession for your ministry. And he said, and you do know about Zita, don't you? And I said, no. Who is Zita? I had no idea. And he said, oh, that's Blessed Carl's wife. You need to go home and get everything you can and start reading about her. You need to know about Zita. And so I did. Unfortunately, there are about 3 books in English that were written, and none of them are in print anymore. So we're working on trying to get the copyright for those. And we've got, you may know, Ryan Grant has said, if we get the copyright, he'll help us get those back into print.
Okay.
So that's the goal. But I did find used copies of these books and dove in and started reading and fell in love with her immediately. And just thought, oh my gosh, she is what we need in this world, especially for women, but also for men, to be able to have this beautiful example of what a woman is supposed to look like. Because she is strong, she is powerful, but she is strong and powerful in her femininity and knowing where her strengths lie as a woman, rather than trying to usurp Blessed Carl, So we went to the symposium, Blessed Carl Symposium, and we met Princess Mariana Galitzin there. And I asked her, is there an American, organization that's working for your grandmother's cause? And she said there had been up in Chicago, but it folded. You have to have a, ecclesiastical overseer. And there was a small group of people in Chicago that had a really good priest overseeing it, but then that priest got moved out of the diocese. So it folded. Well, we had already shared with her our connection to Clear Creek, and so she was the one who got all excited and said, oh, would you check with Father Abbott and see if he would, oversee the cause here in the U.S. and asked me, would I head that up? And, I turned and looked at my husband, and my husband said, of course she will. So that's kind of how it all came about, but it came about at a Blessed Carl Symposium. So
That's crazy. Okay, so you were able to get the so the books are out of print, but you were able to get a hold of 1 or 2 that were out of print?
Yes, actually about 3.
Okay, 3.
Yes, there are 2 that you can find. One is The Last Empress, and it's Gordon Brooks Shepherd, who is the author. And you can find them on used bookstores, but they're pricey. I mean, like $200 pricey. They're pricey. The other one is, the title's escaping me. The author is Hammerschmidt, and it's about her time in Canada. It's about the time when she spent in Canada after her children were just about all grown and gone to university or married and, or moved on. But specifically when she was living in Canada. And it too is used. It's a little harder to find. I don't think there were as many printed to begin with. So, but it's a good one.
And then the third, what's the third?
The third, I don't even remember the title because the family told me not to read it.
Okay, okay.
It's a historical novel. It's not
Oh,
really
okay.
fact, and they said there was just too many. There were too many. What do you call that?
Inaccuracies?
Yeah, just
Or
he took the story in directions that didn't actually happen, and so then it can kind of
yeah.
confuse the situation.
Yeah, it's best to avoid that,
Yes. So
especially especially if you're going for sort of devotional or, biographical information.
right,
I think there's a place for historical novels, but, they should at least, retain the spirit
right.
of the person, of the history itself. But yeah, so okay, so you got these books, and you fell in love with Empress Zita. So what what particularly stood out to you most?
I would say a couple of things. First, again, what I've already stated in
Mhm.
that she was such a strong woman. She she spoke her mind. She got out there and she worked with the people. She visited the war people, the people that were wounded in the war. She went to the hospitals. She went to the orphanages. She was very hands on. She was very involved. But well, and she was so involved that Blessed Carl would have her in many of the political meetings. She'd be the only woman in the room because he wanted her advice. He very highly respected her intelligence, and she was highly intelligent. But at the same time, if he did not take her advice, she was fine with that. And that would be the second thing that I think really impressed me about her, really opened my mind, even beyond, like a marriage relationship, but out into the world. And that is, she was able to be as strong as she was, and as good of a wife as she was, and as beautiful of a mother as she was, and a servant to her people, because she had such an immense trust in divine providence. And so if her husband didn't go the way she suggested, she was fine with that because she knew her husband was a godly man, and she knew that God would direct her husband as need be. And if that wasn't the way she wanted, that was okay because she trusted God's plan first.
Mhm.
Um, and then if you look at her life, they were only married 10 years before she was widowed. And then to raise 8 children and to remain devoted to her husband, to raise those children in the way that he wanted them raised, first Catholic and then royal, in hopes that they would regain the throne and rule from a Catholic foundation, from a Catholic standpoint. Um, I don't think she would have ever, there's never been anything I've read or heard from the family about remarrying, because her focus was 100% on raising those children the way that Carl would have wanted them raised, not the way another man would have wanted them raised. So she
Mhm.
was completely devoted to him. She was a widow for like 63 years. She died. I'm sorry. Carl died. Zita was 29 years old. And then Zita lived to just 2 months short of her 97th birthday.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And
That's
she put on black the day he died, and she wore black every day till the day she died to honor him.
wow.
So,
Yeah, and that's a big sacrifice to not remarry, especially given sort of their poverty.
right. Oh, definitely. Because she was pregnant with the eighth baby when Carl died. And luckily, he had made arrangements with the King of Spain to come and get her and the children if something happened to him. And so when it did, that's how she was able to get off the island of Madeira. Was the King of Spain came and got them.
My understanding is he didn't like Carl did not actually talk to the king, but the king made that on his own, decided that on his own.
I have not heard that or read that, but
So,
that may
okay.
be the case. I don't know.
At least I got that from Charles Coulomb.
Well, Charles would definitely be the one with the facts. Yes.
So it seems more providential, if anything, uh,
Yes.
that the king came to release them, to bring them to Spain.
Right. And
Yeah.
only weeks after they landed in Spain, she gave birth to the eighth child, and then, then raised those children. Because you were to address what you were talking about the poverty. I mean, when they were exiled out of Europe, it was with the clothes on their back and nothing more, nothing. And then, of course, in the war, many of the properties of the Habsburg family were seized. And then, of course, you've got World War II, where many of the properties were bombed. So she had no place to go, as well as the law that was passed that kept her from entering Austria again until she was 90 years old.
Yeah, and those were where her supporters would have been, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, what about family? Did she have family connections outside of Austria?
Yes, her family was, they were from France. Um, she is French, of the Bourbon Parma family.
Hmm.
Even though she was born, many people think she is Italian because she was born in Italy, but they had a summer home in Italy, and when they were at the summer home is when she happened to be born. So, so she did have some family still in France. But this is probably another good question for Charles. I've not read anything about her family really helping them financially. I know, in fact, I just was talking with Princess Mariana this weekend, and she said it was really more of friends of other houses, uh,
Hmm.
other
Nobles.
kings or yes, other nobles that actually gave them more help. So, and even there in the midst of all that poverty, once they came to the US and to Canada after or during World War II, she set about getting clothing and blankets and money for her people back home that were in the war torn countries. She
Hmm.
was more concerned, about helping them after she got all of her children on their feet. She then dove in to really help her people. Um,
Yeah, I mean, so how was there a struggle getting her children on their feet or getting them married?
I
Was that
don't
a
think so.
difficulty?
I don't think so.
No.
They all married a little later because of the war.
Hmm.
They were all involved in peace initiatives, and two of the sons actually joined the American Army and fought, on the American side during World War II. Um, Otto, the oldest, the heir apparent, was very involved in politics and trying to reestablish the monarchy again, but it came clear very quickly that that wasn't going to happen. So
Yeah. And then regarding sort of the getting back more to the symposium, so what was the topic Archduke Rudolph spoke on?
he gave a wonderful presentation with pictures. So the pictures. I'm so sorry, my robot vacuum is in the background making its noises.
That's okay.
But it's finished.
Okay.
He gave a wonderful presentation with pictures, and it's always so nice to see all the different pictures of the family members and of their life. But it was on the 100 years of history of their family, which, again, if you look at Zita's life, that was her life. I mean, she almost made it to 97 years. So he gave, and it's almost impossible to speak about Zita and not speak about Carl and vice versa. And
Yeah.
so he gave history of both of them and, as individuals and then together. And then, of course, as I said, she was 29 years old when Carl died. So then from 29 to 96, he had a lot of history there to share with us.
It's a tribute also to just her sort of her abilities when it comes to like the fact that her grandchildren are out here talking about her cause and promoting her cause, having this familial um element continuing. Uh,
Right.
I don't know how much that is in like other canonization processes.
You don't see a whole lot of it. I mean, most of the time, it seems as though the candidate for canonization has been gone long, and so they don't even
Mhm.
have family left. Especially we're talking about lay people, obviously in this case. So I know Saint Gianna Beretta Mola, her granddaughter. We actually met her granddaughter, and is still, you know, sharing the beauty of her grandmother's life. Um, but yes, and apparently I don't know how many. There are 33 grandchildren, and I don't know how many of them are actually promoting their causes.
Mhm.
We actually met a younger brother of Archduke Rudolph about 6 weeks ago, Archduke Christian, and he was traveling the east side of the US. And it was really neat. We actually got to go, even though we wouldn't be considered young adults. He was traveling the US speaking to young adults. And he actually stopped here in our diocese in Texas. And so I, called the people who were in charge of that and said, "We're certainly not what you would call young adults, but can we come?"
Yeah.
We got to meet him. But the neat thing he was doing was very similar in terms of content as what Archduke Rudolph shared with us, but he did it more as portraying Carl and Zita as models for young adults. Because he said, you don't have necessarily great models from Hollywood. You don't have great models in the sports worlds anymore. Here are your models. Carl and Zita are your models. This is who model your life after them, and then you will be on the right path. And
Yeah.
it was a great message that he was sharing all across the eastern portion of the U.S.
That's good to know. And you don't have a lot of lay saints. There
Right,
are a
right,
ton, especially ones that are so, I mean, easy to connect with, I guess. There are, maybe older ones necessarily, but there are tons of priests and, bishops and popes and, nuns and that sort of thing. A
right,
lot of religious, but to have two lay people be sort of the focus of imitating them is such an interesting element that you very often don't get.
right, right.
And
We
really, without family is such um, a disaster these days. And for it seems like Empress Zita came from a good family, as and Blessed Carl had a very difficult family life regarding his father, at least. And it just shows that there are way that that he's able to bring up, or she's mainly, because he died so early, but she was able to bring up 8 children, and
yes,
such large families. And of course it'd be great if people emulated them more.
right. Right, because the oldest, Otto, was 11 years old when Carl died. So, 8 children under 11 years and younger. So, we're not talking about older teenagers that can help just a whole lot with the little ones. I mean, I'm sure the older children absolutely did help, but she had her hands full. She definitely had her hands full.
Yeah, though I do bet it was a good thing to have more, because once the older ones were pretty old, they probably could help a decent amount,
Oh, I'm
as
sure
well
they
as
did.
to have sort of, because Otto, is 11, right, when
Mhm.
Carl dies. But he's had the experience of having a father for those 11 years, and then he can kind of he could I imagine he was very much the man of the house for his
Right,
younger siblings.
right. Absolutely. He had to be. He
Yeah.
did. He had to be.
And I don't think people are thinking in the realm of what if tragedy strikes. But and also people probably think, oh no, why I don't want to have too many kids because then I have to take care of them all if something bad happens. And if if I was a mother or something and my husband died, that'd be terrible. But in some ways, it'd be almost worse for the children if they have nobody else, if they have no siblings.
Siblings. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Archduke Edward Habsburg is really, hitting on this with his big book tour, is, the importance of family.
Yes.
And, it's all very much connected. It's very connected in the Habsburg family. That seems to be, the ones who speak about you know, the family often speak about these things.
You're right. And the book that Archduke Edward wrote, The Habsburg Way, is absolutely excellent. Highly recommend that book. And in there, he speaks of Zita a couple of times as an example of one of his rules. But you're exactly right. His very first rule is get married and have lots of children.
Mhm.
And he talks about how, the Habsburgs reigned for almost 700 years, and they didn't do it through force. They didn't do it through war and, violence like that. They did it through marrying. They kept the peace by marrying and having these big families and joining, with other families. Charles Coulomb at the symposium talked about how the marriage between Karl and Zita, between a Habsburg and a Bourbon, wasn't the first Habsburg and Bourbon that 100 years before or something.
Mhm.
He made it clear that it was far enough away that there was no problem with these two marrying.
Sure. Yeah.
um,
Oh, yeah. What were you saying?
but you're right, family was it is for them even now. My husband and I were able to host the two grandchildren and their spouses during the symposium. And so we got a lot of private time with them to just visit. And that is still the case. It's still the case. Their family, after their faith in God and their relationship with God, family is next. Um, and so apparently that's been in that Habsburg bloodline for a very long time.
That's great to hear. What did the princess? What was her focus in her talk?
She actually didn't give a talk. She was in
Okay.
the Q&A. She doesn't like to give talks, but she loves to just answer people's random questions. So we had Mr. Coulomb gave the first presentation, and then the Archduke gave his, and then in the afternoon we did just an open Q&A and just random questions that were excellent, and that's where she shines, and she really enjoys just being able to answer the questions.
What seemed to be the most sort of interesting thing to the people who went? Like, what were they latching on to most?
I think based on the Q&A, monarchy as a whole, because we can be perfectly honest and open our eyes to see that our democratic republic is crumbling underneath our feet. And so it was a young man who asked a question about, this is the case in which we live. Monarchy is something of long ago in our minds as Americans because we've never known anything like monarchy. What do we do with this? Do we try to regain a monarchy here in this country? And of course, their answer, both the Archduke and the Princess said, that's not what America is about. There are principles of monarchy that could be enacted to always strengthen this country, but I mean, it would take some major doing to create a real monarchy here in this country simply because we've never known it.
Yeah.
But that seemed to be the focus of a lot of people, was just this whole new idea of monarchy, and especially in light of our failing system. looking to the future and saying, okay, this is clearly not working and may not last much longer. What are we going to do? Where do we go from here? Um, so that did seem to be kind of a major, I think, was just this whole idea of a monarchy and living in that. However, we kept bringing it back around. Again, you can't speak about Zita without speaking about Carl and vice
Mhm.
versa. So we did keep bringing it back around to the greatest number of Zita's years were outside of monarchy, and her model to us as wife, widow, mother, grandmother, and still serving her family. She never, I mean, her people, she never abdicated, because when they took the crown of Saint Stephen of Hungary, that was a vow. That was a vow to the Lord, very liturgical. The king had to lay prostrate, just like our priests do when they become priests, and they had vows that they took. And so that was her promise to the Lord, and she wasn't going to break it. And so she still continued to serve as the Queen of Hungary to the best of her ability, even from America and Canada.
Yeah. No, it's interesting though. That the answers from the archdukes and the princesses seem to be no, like, no, that's not what America is about. It's interesting that that's sort of, because I've never heard anything different from any of the other Habsburgs
Yeah.
from that. So it's interesting that that's the same reaction. Even though I bet you have Charles Coulomb on the stage as well. So like I bet he would give a completely different answer regarding that kind of thing.
I think it would definitely leave the door open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. I think that's sort of a thing about like non-Americans looking at America.
Hmm.
But I don't know. That's a different thing. But so how was the symposium made up of mostly families? What was the sort of character of that?
Oh, that's a good question. A mixture. I will say, now that I think about it, most of the families with children there were the children and their families of the members of the board of the foundation. Most of the people, most of the guests that came, there were very few children outside of my own grandchildren and the secretary of the foundation's grandchildren. As it should be, because it is a lot of just sitting and listening, and
Hmm.
that would be really hard for little kiddos. In fact, our little kiddos ended up in the creek during some of the presentations. So, but as far as the rest of the people, it ranged anywhere from high school students to the retired, and everything in between. Um, so it's interesting to see the different levels of interest in all of this,
Yeah. Was
and
it
both
very was
Charles and Zita's.
was it hard for people to get there? Because it is sort of in the middle of nowhere.
It is in the middle of the nowhere. The people that came, I don't think had any trouble, but I do think that probably had some bearing on our numbers, because there is no place to stay there at the monastery. You have to stay probably 30 minutes away is the closest location to stay. And unless you're as one of the men, there are lots more men's quarters than there are for families and for the
Hmm.
women. So most of the most of the people, had to stay at least 30 minutes away. Food. There's not restaurants and that kind of thing around the abbey yet. They're working on that in the local community. So
Oh, they are. Okay. So there's yeah, I mean the community there is very impressive. It seems, a lot of people have moved there to be near
mhm,
the abbey.
yes,
So
yes.
so that's the sort of the community that's growing. So it's so I imagine a lot of the people were people from that community area. And was there a lot of people coming from, like, I don't know, the East Coast, the West Coast, like where other than the speakers, or guests who were like, how far did people come?
To be honest, we didn't have a whole lot of the community because that diocese also had another big event on the
Oh,
same
okay.
day. So a lot of the community had already made plans to go to that. We did have some of the Clear Creek community. In fact, our caterers were locals that are starting their own catering business, which was fabulous. Good food. Well, we had, as your guest, you had just recently Tridentine Brewing. We had those guys, and they're from the
Mhm.
Chicago, South Chicago area. They came down. In fact, there's another young lady that came from Chicago. We had several people come up from Texas. I'm in Texas right now, and so a lot of people came up from Texas. We had some from St. Louis area. I'm trying to think if I know of. I would have to go back and look at the registration to see if we had any from the West Coast or, you know, up in the Northeast. I'm not sure. Those are the ones I know of.
Gotcha.
They
Okay.
did come. They came from outside of just that little area.
So yeah, well, that's great, especially for the future. And do you find like do you find the number of people that know about Zeta are growing? I think Carl gets a lot of attention, and so is I mean, of course they're married, so they kind of come in tandem. But is there a growing number of people who sort of know about Zeta?
I think so. Yes, I would say so. Based on just the emails that I get of people asking for information, and if we can send a relic or something like that. And just so your audience knows, no, we can't send a relic because there are no relics yet. They
Really?
there are no relics until they're beatified.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. And in fact, if you do pass out things and label them as relic before that point, it can put the whole cause to rest. It can just stop.
Yeah.
So right now, no, we have no relics. When she is beatified, then yes, we will have them. We already have them. We're just waiting till she's beatified.
Okay.
Um, um, but based on the emails and the questions and the people sending email asking information, I think yes, it is growing. It's interesting because I think a lot of people are coming to her similarly to how I did, in that I knew of Blessed Carl, but I must admit, what I knew of Blessed Carl was as the peace emperor. That's more how he is promoted.
hmm
Yes, he is also promoted as a wonderful husband and father, but mostly it seems as the peace emperor and how he handled things during World War One. So, when you're focused in on the political aspect of his life, um, at least for me and my naivete, I didn't even think about the wife. That just didn't even come to my mind really until Father Pryor said, "You need to read about Zita." And so now I think pulling Zita up into the light and letting people know about her strengths, her beauty, her trust in divine providence, that adds even more of another layer to Blessed Carl. I think it
Yeah.
highlights him in his marriage and in his family life a little more.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
there is hope for a Empress Zita book in the future for the
Oh,
English
absolutely.
speaking world. So,
Yes.
just people will be able to look out for that in the future. So what is the status of her process for canonization? Is she close to beatification? Like, how do you measure that?
Well, I think that's the word close might be relative in this case, because those are the words that Archduke Rudolph used with me, and he said, we're getting very close. Well, in my mind, I'm thinking close as in this year. And then he said, she's servant of God, and at that point, what happens is they're looking at all of the historical documentation that they can find, testimonies from the people that knew her that are still living, as well as anything that was ever written about her or by her. And the secretary of the cause, her cause, I don't think I said this. This will connect Clear Creek even better. Her cause began and is its official home is Salem in France.
Mm.
So the secretary of the Salem Foundation told me that Zita wrote upwards of 200 letters a week.
Oh, wow.
And so they're having to read through all of those, and just so they're still in the historical documentation stage. And the
Mm.
Archduke said, I think they'll have that completed in the next year and a half to 2 years. And I said, that long? And he said, oh, no, that's not long. That's very short. It's like, So on the back burner, I guess, if you will, of while they're going through all of this documentation, they're also already investigating miracles. Because if the miracle can be proven and put into place, once this documentation is done, they already have the miracle. Boom, she's beatified.
Okay.
So we could hope within the next 2 to 5 years. Who knows? It's all in God's hands. It's all
True.
his timing. And this again is one of her biggest lessons, is this trust in divine providence and his perfect timing and his perfect will. So that is what she is one of the greatest models of right there, is that
Yeah.
trust in divine providence.
That's great. No, it's so there have there been, I know there haven't been any documented miracles necessarily, but do you know of like how many that they're investigating?
Um, there are 2 in Europe that are being investigated, and there is 1 here in the US that is being
Okay.
investigated.
Okay. So yeah, so okay, that's great because um that's great to know that there are, examples of people receiving favors. Um
Yeah.
and she's only been gone for, how many years has she been gone? Not
89, I believe, was 1989 is when she died.
okay, so
87 or 89. I should know that, but I don't remember off the top of my head. So however many years that would be.
so
You
like
do the math.
30 something years. I'm
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
So
yeah,
not
so
that long.
not
Not
very
that long.
long, and yeah, but there's, it's unfortunate though. There are a lot of, um, there are a lot of situations with a lot of miracles, with a lot of different candidates for beatification that just kind of get left behind. So the sort of our devotion is very important for propelling uh, Zeta to the next stage, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because not only can we ask, the more people that are asking for her intercession, the more likely of a miracle, but also the more people find out about her and can learn from her, not only for her canonization, but also for our sanctity, because she was a beautiful, holy woman that we can learn from, both male and female
Yeah.
can learn.
So are there any other sort of things that you're doing? I think you had a novena going
Mhm.
before the event. Is there any other events or uh, sort of things that people can participate in the future?
There will be. I know that here in the DFW area, again, that there will be some type of a smaller event for Blessed Carl in October. And I've been asked to speak at that about Zita. It won't be a big official symposium like last fall. He's kind of doing the same thing we are and doing it every other year. So the year we do a big symposium, he does a small. And the year he does a big symposium, we do a small.
Okay.
So I know then, and then I am more than happy to come share anything and everything I know about Zita with anyone, if there are parishes or women's groups or, any type of interest in knowing more about her. We do have our website. We're currently and constantly developing that and trying to build it. It's empresszitacause.com.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that in the description so people can get in contact with you if they have any questions or maybe speaking engagements or something like that. I bet there are a lot of Well, I think actually one of the big things that we're missing in a lot of parishes are women's groups. At
Ah,
least I'd imagine. I mean, there are, like, rosary groups and that sort of thing, I
mhm.
imagine, but, sort of anything deeper than that, you know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah,
There
I don't know. I don't know what that really looks like out there.
Well, I'm not a woman, so I don't really know, but I just imagine that, especially, there's that lacking with men's groups and that sort of thing too. Is there's sort of the Knights of Columbus, and they do pancake breakfasts or whatever. They do something social, but sometimes there's not a lot of depth,
The
at
depth
least
there.
that I can that I've seen in my
Right.
experience. So, I'd encourage, anybody in their local parish to think about starting groups like that could build on sort of something deeper, and maybe even are there groups that could be like associated groups with the canonization processes?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. Um, yeah, that is a really good question. I'm trying to think of some of the other countries that have cause, organizations for her cause. And I've not seen any kind of sub groups off of them. Um, but, at the same time, there are a lot of, I think Charles Coulomb said there's 20 something um, shrines for Blessed Carl in the US now. And so, in those parishes where there's a relic of Blessed Carl, where there's an altar set up, where you can ask his intercession, I think there may be some participation in learning about that, about him and per se. Um, so, maybe there are some things kind of growing from that. This is all pretty new, here in the US. And again, we're talking about an emperor and an empress where most of us as Americans don't even really understand what that means.
Hmm.
Um, we have our ideas of all the pomp and circumstance. And I have learned so much in the last 3 years of this from the family of how completely different than pomp and circumstance this really is. In Charles Coulomb, oh my goodness, I think the one thing that we took from his talk, so many people took that I will take to my grave, it was so good. He said the difference in the monarchy and what we have here in America, what we've known our whole lives, is that your emperors and your kings were willing to die for their people.
Hmm.
Here, we people are expected to die for our leader.
Yeah.
And so I think I think that's just my personal opinion. This whole growth of knowledge and interest in Blessed Carl and Servant of God Zita is coming with some of that. Some of that is what's drawing people to them, is this desire to see another way, a different way, and how can we implement again. Archduke Edward's book, The Habsburg Way, has seven, I think it calls it 7 rules for turbulent times, and all 7 of those principles can be used and lived here in the US, without a monarchy. We don't have to have a monarchy to use those principles.
Yeah,
um
a Catholic way. It
yes,
just
yes.
so that's I think what a lot of Americans are looking for, and how to do that is very, very difficult.
Well, I told Princess Maria Anna that if we end up, which there's news out there now, if we end up with 1 or 2 Catholic um, candidates for presidency, boy, they're going to get a copy of Charles Coulomb's book on Blessed Carl in the mail and say, okay, if you're going to do this, then do it right. And here's your model.
Yeah. No, that's great. Awesome. So, is there anything else people can look to for things on Empress Zita? We talked about your website. Anything you want to say wrapping up?
Really invite everyone to go to our website and sign up to be on the newsletter, so you get an email update of what's going on and where things are happening. some more information about Zita. And on our website, we also have a link to her official page from Solène that, once you get over there, you can translate it into English. It's in French, but it can be translated. And there you will find lots of pictures and a whole lot more that's already been written. That we don't need to reinvent that wheel. It's already been written. It's there. It's beautiful. And so you can go there and read even more about her. But really, really invite people to sign up for our email newsletter, so you can keep up with what's going on. If we can get these books republished, we'll be selling those. We do have one small little booklet. I don't remember. It's about 30 pages or something, that's called Devoted Love. And we're going to be putting that up on the website for sale. And then fun things like little stickers. A lot of people are putting their stickers on their water bottles, kind of thing. So you'll be able to have some fun stickers. We'll be adding more and more things for purchase on there, so that people can put it in their lives and promote. I've got my Zita coffee cup right here. So just little things like that to just get them out into our world. Again, to help them, both Carl and Zita, in their cause of canonization, but also to help our world by using them as our models and our example.
Awesome. Thank you, Diane. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I'll have all those links in the description. Check out the website, and know that this seems to be growing. So expect more to come in the future.
Yes.
Thank you all for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And God bless.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mark.